Hello and welcome to this video on Typhoon Haiyan. Now this is a video that's part of the EdXL GCSE geography specification. Within it, the weather hazards and climate change topic that is part of the physical geography paper. Okay, before we have a look at the actual case study itself, I just want to do a little bit of a recap on the hazards created by a tropical storm. Remember, a hazard is something that has the potential to cause loss of life, damage to property, environmental damage, has economic costs, and overall disrupts people's lives. So there's 5 images there to help you out. List the 5 hazards created by a tropical storm. Pause the video, have a go on your own in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, welcome back. So the 5 hazards you should have got: intense rainfall, high wind speeds, a storm surge, landslides, and flooding. Okay, so looking at the actual specification for your GCSE geography, taking this part out of it, we need to study different social, economic, and environmental impacts that tropical cyclones can have on a named developed and a named emerging or developing country. So you might have already looked at Hurricane Sandy, which is a tropical cyclone in the USA. So that's our developed case study. Now for a developing country, we're going to look at Typhoon Haiyan, which hit the Philippines in Southeast Asia. Okay, so looking at our global distribution of tropical storms, remember in the Atlantic and the East Pacific Ocean, tropical storms are defined as hurricanes. In the Indian Ocean, they're defined as cyclones. And in the West Pacific Ocean, they're defined as typhoons. Now, Typhoon Haiyan formed in this part of the West Pacific Ocean. Okay, now on here, we've got labeled the Philippines. Okay, and in this red circle is where Typhoon Haiyan started to form. Okay, here is an image of the globe, and this green circle is actually where the tropical storm called Typhoon Haiyan started to form. And the more red the coloring, the higher the ocean temperature. Okay, so you can see near the poles it's nice and blue where the ocean is cooler, and here along the equator you can actually see how warm or how much warmer the ocean temperatures are here. Remember, we need a temperature of at least 27 degrees Celsius for a tropical storm to form above the ocean. Okay, so tracking the actual typhoon. So on the 2nd to the 4th of November in 2013, Typhoon Haiyan formed over the waters of the Western Pacific, okay, around 5 degrees north. Here you can actually see your latitudinal lines along the right-hand side. It's up around just above 5 degrees north and quickly becomes categorized as a tropical storm. Now, as it moves westward, Haiyan moves towards the Southeast Asia, reaching wind speeds of over 157 miles per hour. Remember, we can categorize a tropical storm using the Saffir-Simpson scale. So it's actually reached 156 miles per hour. So we can categorize it as a category 5 tropical storm. Okay, and as it moves towards the Philippines, it reaches the Philippines on the 7th to the 8th of November in 2013, and it remained a category 5 tropical storm. Okay, that's the highest that a tropical storm can be categorized as, reaching wind speeds of above 195 miles per hour. So that's actually one of the highest ever recorded wind speeds for a tropical cyclone. Now, on the 9th of November, we can track the typhoon moving northwest towards China, where it starts to lose its energy and wind speeds begin to decrease. Remember, as it starts moving over land, it loses its energy source, its fuel, which is those warm ocean waters, meaning that the tropical storm starts to decrease in size and energy. Okay, here's a little map, and that pink area shows you the area where the typhoon caused the most damage. Okay, and if we can zoom in, we can actually see some of the cities that are affected, and we're going to focus on Tacloban City. So just take a minute to try and identify that on the map. The area which suffered the most damage was 200 kilometers wide across these central islands called the Visayas. Okay, that is a size much wider than the Greater London area. Okay, so thinking about some of those impacts. Remember, social impacts are those that have impacted the people. Estimates put the number of deaths caused by the typhoon between 6,000 and 7,000 people. Remember back to Hurricane Sandy, that was only 147 people confirmed dead. 1.9 million were left homeless due to the destruction of their homes by high wind speeds and flooding caused by a 5-meter high storm surge. There was a significant risk from illness and disease, including respiratory infections, so anything to do with your lungs, and diarrhea due to the lack of clean drinking water, food, sanitation, shelter, and medication. In the city of Tacloban, those who had survived the typhoon were desperate for food, clean water, and medicine because supplies were extremely limited. This led to claims of looting by the media in some places across the city. So the media were claiming that people were going and stealing these supplies because they were desperate to survive. Okay, so the economic impacts, anything that impacted people's jobs or their ability to make money or the country's ability to support its own economy. The estimated cost for repairs to buildings and key infrastructure was $5.8 billion. Major rice, corn, and sugar producing areas were destroyed, affecting farmers' incomes and a large percentage of the country's population who worked in the agricultural industry. Around 30% of the country work in the agricultural industry in the Philippines. Tacloban Airport was hit by a 5.2-meter storm surge, causing it to close, meaning that business workers and tourists could not fly in or out. Large fishing communities were severely affected. Around 30,000 boats and its associated equipment was destroyed by the typhoon. So a lot of the villages on the coastal area relied on this fish for food, and also they could sell on this fish to earn an income. Okay, finally, the environmental impacts, anything that affects the natural environment and its surroundings. Okay, so thousands of trees were uprooted, leading to a release of carbon dioxide and loss of habitat, resulting in major impacts on the local wildlife. Flooding caused a power barge to collide with the shore. This resulted in a 500-ton oil spill, which leaked out and affected a mangrove ecosystem 10 kilometers south of the incident. These mangrove ecosystems, they grow on the coast, and they can actually protect coastal areas from those high wind speeds because they absorb the energy from a tropical storm. You can go away and have a look at that yourself if you're interested in that. Finally, the typhoon caused major flooding that damaged around 80% of the land in its path. This included around 71,000 hectares of farmland. Okay, so thinking about those impacts, we need to consider how individuals, organizations, and government responded to this typhoon. I've given you some examples to have a read through there if you want to. Okay, so some individual responses to Typhoon Haiyan. Government support and international aid was slow in responding to the typhoon. Therefore, local people decided to seek out food and medical supplies themselves, often stealing from warehouses where they believed food to be kept. Some people even broke into the underground water pipes in search of drinking water. These people were desperate to survive. Local people were trained and paid by an Australian charity called Caritas. This meant that they could help with cleaning up and building emergency shelters in their local area. This was the work of individuals within their own communities. Organizations' response. The FAO, which is the UN's organization or Food and Agricultural Organization, provided local coconut farmers with smart climate schools, which helped educate them on alternative crops that they could grow, which were more resilient. Coconuts take a long time to grow. They needed something that would grow a little bit quicker to ensure that they were making the money to continue to survive and feed themselves. In the 12 months after the typhoon, the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, organized support for the health systems in the Philippines by donating equipment and increasing disease surveillance. So those people were vulnerable to specific diseases. We've already talked about those impacts. The WHO was trying to help out to actually survey the population and see if they were getting ill as a result of the contaminated water caused by the typhoon. The Philippines Meteorological Agency, so they're looking at the weather and the climate. Broadcast warning 2 days before Typhoon Haiyan hit, leading to the evacuation of around 750,000 residents. So people were warned and they decided to leave. Some people decided that they had time to leave their homes. The government response. The response from the national government was slow and they did not send in troops until 1 week after the typhoon had hit. However, they did set up evacuation sites that people could use as temporary shelter. The USA government sent in military planes to provide food supplies out of Tacloban Airport. Around 700 US troops were also sent to the airport to deal with alleged looting and violence. The government in the Philippines have a disaster risk reduction and management team whose objective is to manage and coordinate resources to protect people against natural disasters. Okay, so we've looked at those responses. Now I want you to think about which were the most effective and which were the least effective. Okay, and we can think, well, what are going to be the most effective in the short term? What are going to be the most effective in the long term? So what are going to help people immediately after the hurricane, and what's going to help people rebuild their lives? And then also we need to consider the scale. How is this going to affect the whole country for when a tropical cyclone hits in the future? Okay, for when something like Typhoon Haiyan might impact the country again in either years or decades to come. Okay, so an example I've given here is a delay in government response meant that troops arrived 1 week after the disaster. Now, that's quite short term, only a week after, and that wasn't very effective. It wasn't actually going to help the people who were impacted by the typhoon. Okay, I want you to have a go at this on your own, deciding which were the most effective and least effective, short term, long term, and for the whole country. Take 3 minutes to do that and pause this video. Off you go. Okay, welcome back. You should have had a good go at that now. Remember, this is your own opinion, okay? As long as you can justify it and explain why, then you're on the right track. Okay, so last task to have a go at. I've given you the sentences there. I think that the most effective response was, I want you to explain it, have a go, take 2 minutes to do that, pause the video in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, welcome back. So you should have had a go at this. Here's the answer that I've modeled myself. I think that the most effective response was the government's creation of an action plan for the recovery of the country. This is because it allowed a team to be set up that specializes in disaster management, meaning that strategies would be put in place to respond to a typhoon with the aim of increasing the country's resilience, so its ability to cope in the future to natural disasters in the long term. Okay. So that is our video on Typhoon Haiyan. We can now use that and Hurricane Sandy to compare the two case studies in a developed and a developing country.